However, I am acutely aware of how divided opinion is on this issue, and I want to proceed in a way that builds maximum consensus and allows valid concerns to be properly addressed. For that reason, we will not introduce legislation to Parliament immediately. Instead, it is my intention to publish a draft Gender Recognition Scotland Bill later this year. The bill will be formally introduced to Parliament only when there has been full consultation on the precise details contained within that draft bill. This consultation will include draft impact assessments, including a comprehensive updated equality impact assessment to ensure that all rights are protected in a balanced way. This additional step in the process will, I hope, give Parliament and all stakeholders the opportunity to consider and respond to specific proposals, and it will allow discussions to move from the general to the detailed. All aspects of the draft bill will be open for consultation. We will take forward the legislation when that process has taken place, and we are content that responses have been analysed, concerns allayed, and that we can introduce a bill that has the support of this Parliament and of the public. We will inform Parliament of the timetable for legislation once this process has been completed. Let me now outline some of the key provisions which will be in that draft bill for consultation. Existing requirements in the 2004 Act to provide medical evidence will be removed. However, it is important to stress that the current requirements will be replaced by an alternative statutory process. The term self-identification is routinely used, but in my view this does not adequately reflect the seriousness or the permanency of the process envisaged. As now, applicants will be required to make a solemn statutory declaration that they intend to live in their acquired gender permanently. In addition, applicants will be required to state in the statutory declaration that they have already been living in their acquired gender. Currently, applicants for a gender recognition certificate are required to have been living in their acquired gender for a minimum of 2 years. It is the opinion of the Scottish Government that this should be reduced. Our initial proposal will be for 3 months, but again, this will be fully consulted on. The draft bill will propose that after an application for gender recognition has been made and has been checked to ensure the necessary information and statutory declaration have been provided, there will be a mandatory 3-month reflection period before a gender recognition certificate can be granted. At the end of this period, an applicant will need to confirm that they still wish to proceed. So applicants will need to have lived in their acquired gender for at least 6 months before a gender recognition certificate can be granted. It is and will remain a criminal offence to make a false statutory declaration, the potential punishment for which includes up to 2 years imprisonment. Retaining the requirement for a statutory declaration, being clear a false declaration is a criminal offence, and building in time for reflection enshrines in law the seriousness of this process. No one should doubt that this is a significant undertaking and requires the same level of commitment from the individual as the existing system does. Presiding Officer, the draft bill will not propose legal gender recognition for those under 16. Though we will consider further whether the minimum age of applicants should be reduced from 18 to 16. The consultation will also seek views on what support is needed generally for children and young people uncertain of their gender identity. Central to this is ensuring that all young people have access to support from a trusted adult who they know will listen sympathetically and without judgment, whether that be from a third sector organisation or mental health and wellbeing service. I have heard directly from young trans people of the fear that they face, and our mental health and wellbeing strategy sets out that we must have a country where people can get the right help at the right time, free from discrimination and stigma. This must be true for those querying their gender identity, just as it should be for all young people. I do not intend at this time to extend legal gender recognition to non-binary people, but we recognise the need to address the issues that non-binary people face. I intend to establish a working group to consider possible changes to procedures and practice and what we can learn from best practice internationally, as well as from within Scotland and the rest of the UK. As I said earlier, it's clear that not all of the concerns raised over the past years relate to the specifics of the proposals to reform the Gender Recognition Act. Instead, they are about wider societal and policy issues connected to sex and gender. We recognise that unless we build a strong foundation of clear policy and guidance, then many concerns, particularly from some women, will not be allayed, while at the same time trans rights may not be upheld. Equally, it is important we ensure policies we put in place protect the rights of different groups of people and avoid what may appear to be some rights taking precedence over others. Everyone in Scotland deserves to know that this government will work to promote their rights and protect them from discrimination. It is not enough for me to just say that is our aim. We must demonstrate that commitment in a way that everyone can have trust in. This government will therefore develop guidance that helps bring clarity to these issues and ensures that policymakers and service providers better understand how to ensure that the hard-won rights of both women and trans people can be collectively realised. This will be used across the Scottish Government and available to all public authorities to help inform policy development and implementation. It will also, of course, be publicly available. I can confirm that the type of approach to policy development is being used by the Scottish Government on guidance for schools. We recognise that this is a complicated area, and the recent guidance for schools from LGBT Youth Scotland on transgender young people was produced in good faith and with wide consultation and engagement, with a clear intention of supporting teachers to ensure that all transgender and non-binary children and young people are safe, supported and included in their schools. However, the complexity of these issues mean valid concerns have been raised. The Scottish Government recognises that in taking the inarguably good general principle of inclusivity and developing specific recommendations, the approach risks potentially excluding other girls from female-only spaces, and that cannot be right. We have therefore decided to replace the LGBT youth work with guidance from the Scottish Government. This work is already underway and will be available by the end of the year and be subject to an equality impact assessment. In addition, I want to take this opportunity to begin to address an issue that was raised by some women's groups during the consultation: the collection, disaggregation and use of data by sex and gender. The issue does not result specifically from gender recognition, but there is some overlap, and it has also received increased prominence following the publication of the book Invisible Women by Caroline Criado Perez. This book has drawn attention to the frequency with which data is neither collected nor aggregated in a way that takes account of the differences, including biological and physical differences, between men and women, and the impact of this in areas such as transport, health and access to services. I can therefore announce that the Scottish Government will establish a working group on sex and gender and data comprised of professionals from across statistical services. This will be led by and report to the Chief Statistician. The working group will consider what guidance should be offered to public bodies on the collection of data on sex and gender, including what form data collection and disaggregation is most appropriate in different circumstances. In conclusion, Presiding Officer, the debate in relation to gender recognition has raised a wide number of issues. The aim of this government is to ensure that trans people in Scotland enjoy equality and feel safe and accepted for who they are. And we want to achieve this, and we believe we can do so in a way that does not infringe upon the rights of anyone else. These issues need to be considered carefully, openly, thoughtfully and respectfully. A process of deliberation that is taken forward in such a way will, in my view, enable us to bring forward balanced and evidence proposals and legislation which can be agreed on by this Parliament and supported by the public. I will continue to engage and listen to stakeholders, and I will maintain my open door policy to all MSPs. I will carry out my role to protect all rights and promote equality for all respectfully. I hope that in the coming months, everyone in this chamber will do the same, and that just as this Parliament has found consensus in the past, we will be able to do so again. And I'm happy to take questions.